Okay, Tom. So let's get to the point. Why should a business owner today have a podcast?
Because right now there are thousands, millions of people that you could serve with your current product or service. There's only one problem. They don't know you exist. And everybody's talking about breaking through the noise. Why don't you just have a conversation with them? And today, there's no easier way to get that know, like, and trust, to have an extended conversation with someone when they want, where they want, even at the speed they want, than with podcasts and podcast interviews.
Love that answer, Tom. And before we continue this conversation, let me just introduce you to our audience here. So today I have the privilege of interviewing and chatting with Tom Schwab. He's the founder of Interview Valet. And I'm going to let him explain in more detail in a bit kind of what they do, how they work, and give you all the information on where you can go to learn more about them. But Tom, one thing you just mentioned in that answer as to why a business owner should have a podcast, you mentioned a phrase that I really love, and that's the know, like, and trust. So for us as marketers, that's one of the things that we're always aware of at our company is how do we move people through that cycle, get them to know about you, get them to like you, get them to trust you. And you bring that up as it relates to podcasts. How is it that a podcast is able to do that so effectively?
Well, you think about how intimate podcasting is. It's not, you're talking to somebody right in their ears. They're opting in, right? This podcast listeners are 100% opt-in. They get to hear you. They hear your voice and not just a little soundbite like on a paid ad, but they're hearing your sense of humor, your stories, who you work with, your struggles, your successes. And people want to work with people they like. And HubSpot years ago did a study that said it was highly indicative of a buying intent if somebody looked at about the founders. And you think about it, it's one thing to look about what the founders are. It's another thing to actually listen to them week in and week out and know their stories. And from that standpoint, I think today it's never been easier to make a transaction online. I mean, be a penny cheaper than your competitor. But if you really want to build a business and build lifetime value with a customer, to build that long-term relationship, man, they have to know you. And podcasting, I think, is so much different than other mediums. And I even think it's better than video because video can get dated really quickly. Whereas audio, you're not judging, is their hair funny? Does that look outdated? They're really just listening to the your content. They're listening to what you have to offer there. And like I said before, it's like the only medium where you can multitask while you're doing it. 70% of podcast listeners listen to it sped up. So they not only get to know you, they get to know you when, where, and at what speed they want.
Yeah, absolutely. When we think of podcast, for people watching this and listening to us talk right now, certain names probably come to mind, right? So some of these big name podcasters come to mind, and in the back of their minds, they're probably thinking, "But I could never do that, right? I could never." Have those type of guests. I can never have that type of production value with what I do. How would you respond to somebody who's sitting here listening to us and they're thinking those thoughts?
Well, I think they're lying to themselves. And if they looked at the data, they would say, I didn't know that. Right. So think about it. What's the top 1% of all podcasts? They get 47,000 downloads per episode. And people go, that's it? Yeah. But how many people have ever talked to 47,000 people live? Right. What's the average conference size? What's the average live event that you speak to? I mean, I've flown across country to speak to 100 people, right? With a podcast, you can stay at home and talk to thousands of people throughout time. So bigger is not better. Better is better. And if you can find an audience that loves you, that would come to hear you week after week, even if it's 1,000 people, think about it. If you in your local town rented out the local theater that had 1,000 seats, and showed up once a week and everybody came week after week just to hear what you said, you'd be amazed, right? How powerful would that be? And that's really what podcasting can be.
Yeah, no, that's excellent point, and I do agree with that. Another thing that I think often runs through, business owners, through entrepreneurs' minds when they hear about starting or think about starting a podcast is this thing called time, right? They're running a million different directions, trying to, keep all the balls in the air, so to speak. They're juggling everything. How do you respond to that objection in terms of time?
Well, I agree. To do one well takes time. Anybody that tells you doing a podcast is easy has either never done it or never done it well. Only the great ones make it look easy. It takes a commitment there. And it takes the commitment of most podcasts die within the first 10 episodes. It's called pod fade. So if you're going to do it, make the commitment to do it. But one of the things that's sort of magic with it is that you could go ahead and do that podcast and then repurpose that content, right? I've written a lot of blogs in my life. Every one of them felt like a homework assignment, but I love to talk. So with that, we can talk for 15 minutes and then have somebody else transcribe the interview, somebody else make blogs out of it, somebody else make some video clips, maybe some social memes. So all of a sudden, if you say, well, it's going to take me, the talent side, a couple hours a week to do a blog, think about the amount of content that you could get from there. And it doesn't take your time. So to me, it's the foundation of a content engine. And if you look at it from that standpoint, or look at it of how it can expand your network, how it can highlight customers, how it can tell your story, for the time and money you invest in it, man, it's powerful.
Yeah, absolutely. And I recently heard, and I think it may have come from you, kind of about the future of search as it relates to like Google search and the way that they're actually indexing audio content at this point. Did I hear that from you? Did that come from you?
Yes.
Yeah.
So Google officially came out and said they are now indexing audio and video content. And you notice it now when you put something into search, you could have a blog, a video, and a podcast that are all the same content, and they may pop up 1, 2, and 3. So they're finding that content and putting it out there. I think the next thing that we're going to see now is if Google and the search engines, I guess that's redundant when you say that, is doing all of the audio on there, they're going to be able to tell you when you have a question about podcasting, not only that Tom and Wayne talked about it on this podcast, but they're going to be able to say, and go to minute 7 where they answered this question. So from my standpoint, that's very powerful. And if you think about how people learn, not everybody is a reader, right? I feel like I lie when I say I read one book a week. Technically, somebody reads the book to me. It's called an Audible. And so from that standpoint, you can give the content to people in the way they want. If they want to watch the video, they can watch this video. If they want the podcast, they can rip out the audio and listen to that. If they really want to read it, they can read the entire transcript or a blog summary of it. So to me, it's just a powerful content.
Yeah, absolutely. And for those not familiar, what Tom was referring to is basically where it's going with Google search is when somebody sits down and types in, obstacles maybe to starting a podcast. If we were talking about the obstacles to start a podcast, Google would link you to the exact minute and second where we're having this conversation about the obstacles to starting a podcast. So, for anyone out there who's got a business or product or service that is reliant on specific information, in other words, your customers, your prospective customers are searching for very specific information about the solutions that you provide, it's an extremely powerful way to help with search engine optimization in terms of getting your product in front of people in ways that others aren't and can't at this point.
And most people think of podcasts just as the content, but all of those benefits to it. When people share your content, now your social media goes up. When you're interviewed on other people's podcasts, you get those backlinks and the SEO. It's really amazing when you look at all you get out of it for the little time invested.
Yeah, absolutely. So this is just kind of an outside observation, and I'd like to kind of throw this out to you and get your feedback on this as it relates to the different type of podcast that someone could start. So kind of from my outside observation and just the ones that I pay attention to and listen to, one type would be kind of like we're doing, which is conversation style. So, a host and a guest on the show, back and forth dialogue. Another one would be where there may be a host of a show, and that host isn't necessarily the expert, but that host kind of facilitates the dialogue maybe between a host and someone else. So it's kind of like they're the moderator, so to speak, of that podcast. Lead to Win by Michael Hyatt comes to mind when I think about that. They have the host of the show, and then Larry's the host, and then Michael and his daughter Megan are the quote unquote stars of that. And then the other one is more of kind of the monologue style, right? Where it's the one person kind of sharing on the podcast. Are those the three typical that you see? Are there others that I'm not paying attention to?
I think there's probably a fourth one that's quickly dying, and that was asking the same questions over and over. So it was very process driven. Every person got asks the same 5 or 6 questions. And when it first started out, it was easy for the host. It was easy for the guest, but I think we're going beyond there. One of the things that you look at podcasts, it's evergreen content. So as you're talking, you need to be timely, but also timeless, because as you're recording something in 2020, it may not go live for a few months, and somebody may hear it a year later. So we always talk to people about making sure it's timely but timeless. So don't wish somebody a Merry Christmas if you record the day before Christmas, right? Because it may come out in February, and then it's going to sound dated, and somebody listens to it in the middle of summer, and they're just going to say, wow, this must be old, outdated stuff.
Right. No, that makes complete sense. When we think of, let's say we've got somebody watching this and they think, you know what, okay, I'm kind of convinced, I'm on the fence. I think maybe a podcast is the thing for me. But is it expensive to actually get going? Like in terms of equipment and gear, what's that look like?
It's always that thing. You can either have time or money. Which one are you going to put into it? If you have neither, probably not a good thing to go. But with that, you can get a good sounding microphone for under $70. And I would definitely recommend that, because just using the built-in microphone, the audio quality is going to be poor. You can audio edit. There's free courses, free tools out there. So you can put the course together, or excuse me, you can put the podcast together, but it's going to take you extra time there. You can always hire people to do that. And they can do the editing and putting it up there. But really, to me, it's an investment, not a spend, right? If I spend $100 on Facebook ads, it's gone tomorrow. Whereas if I invest $100 in content, be it blogs, be it podcast interviews, man, that's going to be around for a long, long time.
Yeah. So we've spent some time now really talking about, the concept or the idea of launching your own podcast, right? Starting a podcast and all the benefits that could come along with that. But there's a whole nother side. And this is something that is very unique to what y'all do at Interview Valet. And that is actually helping people get placed or get booked onto podcasts, right? Talk us through kind of what that looks like and what that even means.
So a lot of people will say, should I be a podcast guest or a podcast host? And to me, that's like asking, should I be an Uber driver or an Uber passenger? It's the same platform. You're just using it for different goals. So I say, if you want to nurture your current leads, nurture your current customers, then having a podcast is the best way to do that. But if you're going and looking to get new leads, get new exposure, well, then you've got to go to new ponds. And that means going to different podcasts, talking there, being the featured guests, getting exposed to that. So we really focus on that side of helping thought leaders, authors, coaches, speakers, brands, get out there and get featured on targeted podcast interviews so they can leverage other people's platforms, get that know, like, and trust. They can get introduced by a trusted expert, which is the host. Build that rapport so that they can move people from being just passive listeners to active visitors to their site and ultimately engage leads.
Yeah. And what would that process look like? So let's say somebody's watching this and they think, that's an interesting idea. I would love to get my message out to new markets that I wouldn't otherwise have access to. What's that look like? What's the process look like? So they would reach out, and what takes place?
Yeah, so they reach out and we would first do a discovery call with them, and we would ask them questions and learn about their business, and really what we would be looking at for message, market, and machine. Those three things is what give you results on podcast interviews. So message is, do you have interesting stories to tell, not just a product to sell? Market is, do you know who you want to talk to? Do you have something that will help them, meaning that they could buy or service? And then finally, we'd look at the machine. So when I hear you on a podcast, I am going to go to your website. I am going to go to your social media. And if your website looks like it was built in Y2K, I don't care how great the interview was, you just destroyed your credibility. Or if I hear you on a podcast and I look for you on social media and you look like you're in a witness protection plan, it's not going to convert. So we work with people and say, your message, market, machine, here's things that you could do. And then we'll talk to them about how they could leverage this to meet their goals. And that could be to get more podcast subscribers. It could be to improve their SEO. It could be to fill their funnel with leads. It could be to increase their social media. There's all kinds of different ways that you could use podcast interviews for. And we walk them through it. Then we look and say, hey, based on what we know and the relationships we have, we think we could help you, or we wouldn't be the best partner for you. We focus on three verticals. It's not necessarily where our clients are, but where our clients' clients are. And that's business, faith and Christianity, and health and nutrition and wellness. So if you're trying to get on comedy podcasts, I'd love to talk to you, right? I'll tell you if it'll work for you, but we're not the agency for you if you're into comedy podcasts.
Yeah, no, I understand that. And I appreciate you taking the time to kind of explain that. And for those out there, watching this, we've actually been using Tom and Interview Valet, their service for, I'm terrible with timeframes, maybe 6 months or so. Sure, we could go out and try to find all these podcasts and try to do the bookings and all that stuff ourselves. But, it's not what we want to do. We want to be serving our clients. And so it's a tremendous asset to us to be able to utilize Tom's team to help us go out and find those shows that would be a good fit for our messaging and what we're trying to communicate to the world. And, for us personally, I can say that, the service has been great. And you put us in markets we would have never otherwise ended up in if it had not been for y'all's service.
Well, thank you. And we had, I always say clients are the best copywriters. We had one client early on that said, I love working with you because you let me be the guest and you take care of all the rest. And I'm like, that's a good tagline. and somebody else pointed out to me that, Sinatra only sang. I'm like, what's that mean? He's like, well, he was a hardworking guy. He was a smart guy, but he realized the best use of his time was performing. And so from that standpoint, he said, I just want to be the performer. You find the shows, you introduce me to the shows, you go ahead and prep me for the shows. Let me show up, be the star, share my insights, and then drop the microphone and go on with my day.
Yeah, no, that makes complete sense. I'd never heard the Sinatra one. That's a great one. Kind of as we start wrapping up here, if you could just kind of revisit, you said it so beautifully earlier when you said, if you're looking to something, the blank, you should start a podcast. And if you're looking for something else, you should be a guest on podcasts. Kind of recap that again for us.
It's a powerful thing. So if you want to get more leads, get more exposure, get more backlinks and SEO, get more social media followers, then you've got to get out there. And that's getting out there on targeted podcast interviews, getting out there where your new customers are. If you want to nurture your current leads, nurture your current customers, that's a great place to have your own podcast and build up your own expertise. So really, it's not an either or. Both strategies actually help each other. So the biggest thing is if you've got knowledge, if you've got something to share, if you know with your product or service, you could help a whole lot of people if they only knew about you. Well, use technology, use podcasting to connect with them so that you're not the best kept secret.
No, that's great. Very succinct way of saying that. Tom, where can people go to learn more about you and your company and what y'all are up to?
Sure. Just go to interviewvalet.com. So it's interviewvalet with the V.com.
Got it. And we will make sure to put a link to that or to y'all's website in the description of this video as well. Any final thoughts that you'd like to end with, Tom?
Well, the one thing I would like to share with everybody is that most people go, well, Wayne can do a podcast because he knows so much other things. Tom can do that. And the thing is what's ordinary to you is amazing to others. Often we underestimate what we know. And I believe we're all blessed to be a blessing. There's so many things that you know that could help other people in your business, in your personal life, in the struggles that you've gone through. And today it's never been easier to help people and to share that, either as the podcast host or a podcast guest. If I can do it from Kalamazoo, Michigan, you can do it from where you are.
No, that's great. And I do agree with that message. It is a very powerful platform. It's a platform that's not going anywhere anytime soon. And as a matter of fact, just based on what we were talking about, Google and kind of the way that they're doing their updating their search results now, it's looking like it's only going to even get more powerful as they update those things in terms of people finding new content and finding your message.
I think we're just still at the beginning of the golden age of podcasting. It's going to be fun to see how it grows and how it serves people.
Yeah, I agree with you, Tom. Well, thank you so much for taking time out of your day, Tom. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Wayne. I appreciate all you do.